let's get to some football. So a few weeks ago, I told you that I was beginning to wonder if, yes, some of last year's offensive approach had to do with some of the limitations of the quarterback, okay? But now they got a 5-star back there, and they're kind of running the same offense. It's just he has more ability, so he expands it, organically within the offense, but the scheme itself has not changed at all right? And I told you I was beginning to wonder if Jimmy was replaying what he did at Stanford when he was out there against Norm Chow and USC and Chip Kelly in Oregon at their innovative heights, and they all could recruit, different and better than you can at a Stanford with some of the restrictions there. And he just decided, you know what, I'm going to, styles make fights. They zig, I'm going to zag. I'm going to see if I can beat them by forcing them to adjust to the way we play. And it worked fabulously for him. And the more I think about this since I brought this up to you, I am more convinced of it. And I'm especially convinced of it after I went and looked up this information. Check this out, all right? Per game offensive averages. This is Stanford 2010, Andrew Luck, on his way to being the number 1 pick in the draft. Michigan this year. Look at this, Mark. Look how this is freaking crazy. Stanford 2010, 41 rushing attempts a game. Michigan 22, 43. Stanford 2010, 29 passing attempts a game. Michigan 22, 27. Stanford 2010 completion percentage, 70%. Michigan 72. Stanford 472 yards of offense a game. Michigan 470. Stanford 24 first downs a game. Michigan 25. Stanford basically 40 points per game. Michigan 22, 41. Now, because they were better in the red zone with Andrew Luck, he threw for 32 touchdowns that year. I mean, when this is all said and done, J.J. McCarthy might get to half of that. But that can't be a coincidence. That stat profile cannot possibly be a coincidence, Mark. I mean, that is a carbon copy. I think that this is on purpose. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's astounding. It's almost as though Jim Harbaugh was sitting there in the fourth quarter of these blowout games saying, hey, we got to run the ball about 3 consecutive times because we need to stay with these averages.
Yes, I've got a paradigm I'm trying to fulfill. Yes.
Yes, that is crazy. That is crazy. I think you hit on something. I went down the YouTube rabbit hole last night of watching early to mid 1980s Ohio State Michigan games and just kind of scanning through and reliving plays and that sort of thing that I didn't intend on doing. There hasn't been a stylistic difference between these two programs until Rich Rod took over, and that was the obvious separation stylistically. And then it kind of carried on because modern offensive football changed, and Ohio State went more with that. And then Harbaugh was hired and so forth and so on, and we've seen the stylistic differences. But yeah, the Oregon-Stanford games were just phenomenal when Jim was there. And you got to think that he lived it. He strategized it. He didn't just live it as a fan. He was the architect of it. I think that has to be the reason why. And he stumbled upon something to say, because this frustration of hitting this Ohio State wall over and over and over, trying to recruit against them.
I went to Speed and Space and all this stuff, right? Yeah.
Trying to do that. It has to be that, because it is turning into what we are watching and what we saw 10 years ago with Oregon and Stanford that he was right in the middle of.
Now, they have to fix the red. I'm totally fine with everything they're doing. I mean, I'm a fan. I grew up playing the NCAA football video game. Who am I kidding? I'm still playing the NCAA football video game. I'm almost 50. Okay. So I love chucking the ball around. Would I love to see my 5-star quarterback out there putting up, close to CJ Stroud numbers? Sure, I would. But I understand that the video games we all grew up playing and still do are not real football. I get that. Okay. And what's funny is I was watching the Penn State-Ohio State game, and I could see Ryan Day doing the same thing from the other side of the street. I could see Ryan Day, basically, I would contend, letting Penn State even take the lead in the game by maintaining a running game, when at no point were they really going to stop those receivers or if they truly unleashed them, almost as if he is preparing his team for the last game of the year too, that, hey, Who knows, man? Even it snows in Columbus in November too, guys. Okay, we might not get to play in a track meet in that game. Can we beat them left-handed? And I wonder. There's been more complaining about Ryan Day's play calling this year than I can ever remember. I've heard a ton of complaining about it, and I wonder if it's not that he just got dumb, but he's actually realizing that team up north. I'm gonna have to beat them maybe left-handed moving forward in the future. They might more successfully drag me into a mosh pit. Are my guys ready to play that way? They were not last year. Are they ready for that in the future? So I don't think he just suddenly just forgot that he's got really good receivers, Mark. I think he is also likewise trying to counter what Jimmy has established. In fact, I kind of take it that for the first time in a while, beyond the institutional respect for the rivalry, that this is actually a sign of respect for Michigan as an opponent, if you know what I'm trying to say. We've got to acknowledge that maybe they have figured something out that we have to respond to.
On one particular drive, Ohio State, while the game was still in doubt in the red zone, ran on 3rd and 6. And that 3rd and 6 run, I thought, was to set up the 4th and 2.
No, then they just kicked the field goal. Yes.
On the field goal. Okay, you get the best wide receivers in the country. You're not throwing on 3rd and 6. And then you're going to kick the field goal with a reliable field goal kicker from whatever distance. That didn't make any sense to me. I get the point if that's going to be the long-term strategy, but for in the moment, made no sense. I do think, Steve, that Michigan's red zone issues aren't what Ohio State's red zone issues are. I think that Ohio State's issues are much deeper and they're more serious and they're more of a concern. Michigan is getting a lead and sitting on it. Against Michigan State, they basically said, red zone, sure, if somebody breaks it, if Blake Corum breaks a 15-yard run, we'll take the touchdown, but if we don't get it, that's fine. We'll just kick the field goal. We're not stretching. We're not going to challenge. We're not going to trust. You could look at it that way. J.J. McCarthy, that might be an issue. But for Ohio State, they're just not getting it done in the red zone. Aside from that example that I just gave, I think it's more Michigan just being conservative in the red zone, Ohio State having legitimate struggles in the red zone.
So am I a bad fan that I want Greg Schiano to play us exactly like he did last year? Because I just don't believe the Michigan coaching staff is going to give our offense in-game passing reps for the sake of in-game passing reps. I just think if you just let us just run the ball for 5 yards a clip for 50 times, we're going to do it. Like, we're not going to, I don't think, God bless him one way or the other. This is like probably for you, like watching Jim Tressel, a decade ago. There is no game situation where I will voluntarily put the ball at risk. You will have to force me to put the ball at risk. And we're kind of playing that way now. And so I'm hoping Schiano does to us what he did a year ago. Last year, they almost beat us. We had barely 100 yards rushing in that game. And I hope he does. I thought Michigan State was going to do this. They didn't. They played 2 safeties high most of the game, almost as if they knew they could not win. And so they were just trying to keep the score down, basically, trying to avoid getting, gashed on a play and Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards houses them like we did Penn State. They stayed back, let us get 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 yards over and over and over again, like they were just trying to cover the spread. I hope Schiano goes balls out against the run, so that we have to take some in-game passing reps, especially in the red zone. Does that make me a bad fan?
No, it doesn't make you a bad fan. What it does, though, however, is Michigan may have such a good offensive line, and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards may be so good that they can still run through that defensive approach from Rutgers, which they've got a capable, competent defense. It took Minnesota a long time to finally break their backs, and Minnesota's nowhere close to Michigan. But I want to see it. I'm not a fan. I'm an anti-Michigan fan. I'm on the other side of the spectrum, and I would just like to see it because I want to see J.J. McCarthy have to show off his arm. But then again, for my interests, it might be better that he has to do that in Columbus for the first time, because obviously I would rather see him without the reps, without that experience, without being pushed against the wall and having to do it for the first time in Columbus.